Well, welcome back to another episode of the Cruise Conversations podcast. I'm Michael.
And I'm Frank.
And today's episode is episode number 85, and we're sitting down with Erik to talk about his recent Carnival Valor sailing. Let's jump into it.
Well, like we mentioned at the top, today we've got our friend Erik. Erik reached out to us, I believe, on Instagram, and just recently got off Carnival Valor, sailing from New Orleans and going on a 4-night cruise to Cozumel. So we're super excited. Erik, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Erik, just as a quick introduction, what we like to do is, first of all, you're a teacher, by the way. So thank you for all that you do to help educate students on math. I had some really great teachers, especially in math, and that's why it became one of my favorite subjects. So first of all, thank you for being a teacher. And Erik, you've been on some cruises. Why don't you give a little bit of background on just generically like why you enjoy traveling, and then kind of going into your cruising experience. How many cruises have you been on so far?
Sure. So I grew up traveling. Whenever Dad would get his 2 weeks off of work during the summer, he would just come home, tell us, pack a suitcase, and we would take off. And my wife kind of grew up with the same dynamic in her family. And whenever we got together, her parents brought us on a cruise, and that kind of got me hooked on it. She had been cruising before, and we did several out of New Orleans, and now we've done several out of Galveston. I think this one that we're talking about today was either number 7 or 8 for us together, and we've already got a couple more booked. But we just enjoy traveling because it lets us step into that realm of having no responsibilities for a few days at least.
Yeah, so it's super cool. Like you said, you were from kind of the New Orleans area. We've had Jeremy on the podcast in the past. He's from Galveston. So, I mean, these are two places we've never cruised from. Most of our cruises are mostly all out of Florida, whether Canaveral, Miami, Fort Lauderdale. So kind of just jumping into your cruise now, what does it look like? Like you said, you live pretty close to the port, so I'm guessing you're just driving over day of to go get on the cruise ship?
Yeah, anytime we sail out of Galveston, we always do the night before, but we are from our doorstep to the port is exactly 1 hour. We usually leave early enough just so that we don't get into any of the rush hour traffic, because traffic down there does get pretty bad. But, we've actually not sailed out of New Orleans since 2019, and that was our honeymoon cruise, and it was actually on the Dream, well, the Dream's now in Galveston. But long story short, this one was able to fit in our schedule when we needed to go, and taking minimal days off of work. And, it's really convenient being that close to port. Drive down wasn't bad. Traffic was fine. Stopped for breakfast and then pulled in, right into the port. So it wasn't bad at all.
I feel like if I lived that close to a port, Erik, I wouldn't even really care. Like, I would just go on that ship just because, like, we have to fly. So we're like, okay, the world's our oyster. Like, whether we go to Miami or Port Canaveral, it doesn't really matter for us. But for you, it's like, yeah, why would I get on a plane to go on another cruise ship when I can just like, that's so nice.
Yeah, that's kind of the tough part, because we're always looking and seeing, and the only disadvantage is there's not a ton of variety. The Valor, I think, does just 4 and 5 days, and then there's also the Liberty that does, I think the Liberty just does 7 days. So there's not a whole lot of variety as far as, itineraries and ports that you can go to, but there's many times when the convenience does tend to outweigh, those options.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the embarkation process at New Orleans. Now, you said you've sailed out of Galveston as well. How would you say that the embarkation, when you get to the port, the parking, the getting through security, the checking in at the terminal, how did all of that go for this cruise compared to what you've kind of seen in the past?
We were a little nervous about going back out of New Orleans because the couple of times that we did before, embarkation seemed really chaotic, disorganized, and it felt like we would wait in lines forever. But this time was a totally different story. The one thing that New Orleans port does have going for it is the parking situation. And if someone's planning to sail out of there, I'll give them that tip. Don't even try to find an off-site parking. Just do yourself a favor. Pay I think it's $25 a day. Park in the garage, because the way it works is you pull into the garage. The porter meets you at the gate after you pay. They take your luggage from your car, and they send it on about its way, and then they give you a parking spot, and that's it. You're done. You go up the elevator and you go check in, and you're finished. It was super simple. And we'll probably, if we do a little bit on debarkation, I'll talk about this, but I made sure to tip the porter really, really well. And he said, "Oh, well, I've got a special parking spot for you." And I thought he was just being nice and pulling our leg, but we'll talk about it later on. That actually came very much in handy whenever we were trying to leave. But once we parked, we went up the elevator, checked in. I'll subtract a little bit of time for waiting because we did have the second earliest check-in time. We're not quite to Diamond or Platinum yet. They always have the first boarding time. So I think our check-in time was 10 o'clock, and we pulled into the garage 10 o'clock on the dot. And by 10:15, we were sitting, staring at the ship, waiting to get on. And, they were still trying to clear the ship, get down to count zero, I think they call it, and, get the last folks off so they could get us on. And we were stepping onto the ship by 10:40. So it was incredibly quick and efficient. We were very pleased with that.
That's awesome. I'm one of those people that's like with like you, Eric, that's like, I don't want to, like, why would I show up later? Like, I'd rather be there ready to board and someone's like, you got to wait 30 minutes. Like, what else am I going to do? I want to get on the ship. I want to start working that drink package. I want to start eating that food. I want to be in vacation mode. I don't want to be dragging my luggage around Miami or, in your case, New Orleans. Like, I just want to be on the ship. I just want to get there as soon as I can and get on,
And, that's something we did a little bit different this time. The previous cruise we did back in June, we brought our toddler with us, so we had a lot more things that we were carrying on. But we made a point of it this time to pack as little as possible because it was just the two of us and then two friends that came with us. My wife and I walked on with only what was in our pockets. We had our documents in our pockets, and that was it. Our luggage, everything. We went, they checked with the porters because, knock on wood, we've never had an issue with luggage getting lost. But I will tell you that it changed the dynamic of the whole first day, not having to carry anything around. It was wonderful. And we, I'll confess, we may or may not have sat and pointed and laughed at some people that were carrying on 5 suitcases and 10, 12 packs of Coke and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real good thing to know, especially for first-time cruisers. Check, like, your big luggage in with the porters. Don't try and carry it on because most of the time you can't get in your room for a couple hours once you're on the ship. And like you said, the last thing you want to do is be trying to navigate the Lido buffet when you're grabbing lunch with multiple suitcases because it, one, takes up a lot of space, and two, you don't need to do it. All right, Eric, so you mentioned that this was your first time on the Carnival Valor. What were your first impressions when you walked onto the ship?
When we stepped on, we were amazed at how beautiful of a ship it was. The only experience that we had had on ships before this was the Dream class, and we were pretty accustomed to what those looked like. This one, you can definitely tell it was made in the early 2000s. It's almost what you would call gaudy, but it gives you that experience of almost a luxury cruise because it was really decked out, beautiful. You walk in, you see the typical Carnival atrium all the way up to 11 or 12, whatever it was. And the ship is decorated to suit the name. There's lots of patriotic decorations everywhere. There's old presidents' faces embossed in the atrium. Really, really classic Carnival cruise ship, but absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, so I actually went and watched the video, Eric, to see kind of the layout because I've not been on the Valor. And like you said, the atrium just kind of takes your breath away. It's so well designed and, like you said, beautiful and classy. What was the first thing that you guys ended up doing when you got on board?
So we knew from past experience that some of the popular food places, as the cruise went on, would get impossibly crowded. So we went straight to Guy's Burger to get a couple of those. And I believe that's the only time that we had Guy's Burger on the cruise because the lines were incredible. We stepped on the boat at 10:40. Everything was wide open. And, thankfully, there wasn't a lot of people on the first couple of check-ins. There were a few because the way Carnival does their check-ins, first group to go on is your Diamond, Platinum, and those that have suites, and then next is just whoever checks in. And so we were able to get on just behind those people, so we were able to explore the ship for a couple hours, where there weren't a lot of people. But of course, we went straight to Guy's Burger, got that, sat down, and we did a couple hours of people watching, and that was pretty entertaining.
I think that's always like one of the funniest parts of day one, right? Like you said, we like to get on early and we don't like to wait, right? And you have people that are coming on hours later and it's like, man, we've been on the ship. Like we had lunch. Like we're really like you said, already in vacation mode. You saw people coming on with their luggage,
Yeah.
like.
I think a lot of it too is like if you live near a port like Erik and you do a lot of weekend cruises, you're probably like maybe even working, or even pulling your kids out of school, like they're doing a half day and then you're jumping on board at 1 o'clock. So it just is like different for us because we're traveling into like, we're going to make the most. But some people, like you said, are just going for the weekend getaway. And they're like, I'm just going to pull the kids out of school. I'm going to do work in the morning and have my bags packed and then bring them to the port. But that's just so different than what I'm used to.
And I couldn't imagine the stress of getting on later. We live close enough to where, and we're familiar enough with the area where if something happens, we could always find a backup route. But, we never put ourselves in that position of being even remotely close to being late to get on the ship, because I would hate to have all that anticipation of a vacation and then, miss it.
All right, so you're on the ship now. At some point, your room was ready, so you probably ventured over to your room to check it out. What type of room did you book, and what did you think of it?
We were able to get just a regular interior room. The last few cruises that we've done, we've stuck with those, budget in mind, but we've really actually come to enjoy those rooms. We used to get balconies all the time, but we kind of got to where we didn't use them as much as what we felt, the value was worth. So we have gotten these interior rooms, and we did something a little different this time. We actually stayed on the Lido deck at the forward of the ship. And it was kind of a game changer for us, not having to go up and down the elevator to get to the Lido deck, to get to a lot of those things that we wanted to see during the day. We would just walk out of our room, take a left, go a couple hundred feet, and there was everything. And it was really, really nice. And staying at the forward of the ship was kind of nice too, because there wasn't a whole lot of foot traffic back and forth. But yeah, it was a typical Carnival interior room, bed, small closets, pretty compact bathroom. And as with the rest of the ship, you could tell that it's a few years old, because when you walk in, the first thing that you see is the salmon colored crown molding around the room. So yep, that's early 2000s for you. But as with the rest of the ship, extremely well kept. Like, we couldn't find a blemish anywhere in our room. It was very, very well kept. We were super impressed with that. And a lot of times folks will ask us, why an interior? Well, because, not only the budget, but it makes for some great middle of the day naps. Because you go in there, close that door, and it's pitch black.
Erik, I wanted to ask too, I know a lot of people like come to us as booking cruises for them and stuff. They're like, I don't want to be in the front of the ship because the waves. Did that end up bothering you at all, being that close to the front, just with the motion and the ocean? You could typically, sometimes people say they feel it more in the front. And, obviously the best place to be is midship for the waves. Did you have any issues with that, or was it no issues there?
We were kind of anticipating that, because up to this point, I'm not sure what the reason was, but we would always stay deck 7 midship. And I guess that's part of it, is because, mathematically speaking, that is where you would feel the motion the least. But this time we really didn't feel a difference. Now, the seas were very, very smooth on this sailing. When we did one on the breeze back in June, we actually went through Tropical Storm Alberto with over 20-foot seas.
Oh my gosh.
That was a ride. But this was smooth, so we didn't feel any difference. I'm sure maybe on a rough sea day you would feel something, but no, we really didn't. And even when we were coming in and out of the Mississippi River, if we happened to be in our room, we couldn't tell the difference at all.
Another thing to note, he mentioned his room was on the Lido deck. Have you ever stayed on the Lido or pool deck? I know, I haven't either. I feel like whenever I'm looking at rooms, I'm always kind of looking, all right, like I want to be like midway to like where my dining room is going to be, or midway to like the promenade deck or all of that. But then anytime I'm on the ship, I see the rooms off the pool deck. I'm always like, man, that would be great to stay at. Because like you said, you just walk right out and you're there, but I'm never thinking that when I'm actually booking.
Yeah, it was wonderful. We're usually pretty careful about where we book our rooms. We had some friends that were going on sailing just after us on this same boat, and they were booked on deck 8 midship. And we were able to convince them to change that, because on the Valor, deck 9 is the Lido deck. So if you're deck 8 midship, you're underneath the pool deck, and you're going to hear the action all night. The only caveat with staying where we were at the front of the ship is, those elevators on the front are always crowded. So our shortcut to get to the dining room, we would walk out of our room, go to the back of the Lido deck, and then just take the elevator straight down to the dining room. because it was almost impossible to navigate the main atrium elevators. It was really crowded.
So you were talking about getting in and out of the Mississippi River. Now, how was Sail Away on the Carnival Valor? Did you guys end up doing a Sail Away party, or did you kind of just keep it low key on this one?
It was absolutely packed. One thing that we've learned about Carnival itineraries, the cheaper they are, the shorter they are, the more party heavy they are. And that's just the way, and especially when you're sailing out of New Orleans, it's a party crowd anyway. And we're kind of used to that. So the four of us that went, it was myself, my wife, and then a coworker of my wife's and her husband. And he would just kind of sit in the corner and people watch, and my wife and her friend would go get down in the middle of it. Well, during Sail Away, I wanted to get a good view of this, and so I went up to the front of the ship as high up as I could go, and so I watched it from there. And it was fun. It was neat. You got a lot of really neat pictures and videos of the Sail Away party with the skyline of New Orleans in the background as we're turning around.
That's awesome.
To leave the port. It was neat, but it was like I said, it was packed, as most of the deck activities for the sailing was.
Awesome. So like we mentioned at the top, this cruise was doing a stop in Cozumel. Let's talk about your day in Cozumel. Have you been to Cozumel before? I'm guessing, like you said, since some of your itineraries out of Galveston and New Orleans are are pretty limited overall. I'm sure you've been here before. But what did your day look like here in Cozumel?
Yeah, we've been to Cozumel, I think, on every single cruise that we've been on. So we're very comfortable, very familiar with the area. Our day in Cozumel looked a little different this time. We wanted to kind of explore, the port on our own without any excursions, but we did want to stay close. Usually we rent a Jeep and go to the other side of the island where there's nobody. But they got they sustained some damage during this past hurricane season, and we weren't really sure about the condition of that side of the island. So we decided just to walk around, hang out at the port, and we ended up finding this place. If you go off the ship, go through the shops and take a left out of the port and just keep walking, there's a little place called Pancho's Backyard. And we set up there for breakfast, and we got off the ship pretty early, about 8:30. So we found this place by 9 o'clock and had guacamole for breakfast, which was wonderful.
That's awesome.
But we were able to sit there, and you could see all the ships. You could see the Carnival ships. You could see the Royal Caribbean ships further down the way in the shade. And actually, it was a nice, cool day. It was 75 and sunny, which was really nice compared to what we're used to in Cozumel. And we were worried at first that this place was going to get crowded, but if you sat at one of their tables, they came up and they made sure to let you know that, hey, you've got to order some food or something, because this is our restaurant. You can't just sit here. So that was really nice. But we sat there for a couple hours, glass bottle Cokes,
that's awesome.
Guacamole, queso, all kinds of good stuff, and just watched the boats. People watched and visited. And we were actually able to get back on the ship probably before lunchtime. So, we kind of had a twofold port day. We explored the port, but then we also got to utilize the ship whenever nobody was on it. Because if you ever stay on the ship when you're in Cozumel, it's like having the ship to yourself, because everybody gets off at Cozumel. So we got back on the ship, and there had to have been less than 300 or 400 people left on the ship. So that was super nice getting to kind of have it to ourselves.
That's awesome. I have not been to Cozumel, and it's been a while. So when you talked about the Jeep tour, that sounds like something that'd be up my alley. Like, since it's been so long, kind of do it on your own, hit some of the spots that you're interested in stopping at, grab some good food in Cozumel. But yeah, that sounds like you guys had a really good day eating some chips and some local Mexican food. So tough to beat that. So now let's talk about your sea days. You had 2 sea days on board the Carnival Valor. What did your typical sea day look like? Did you guys kind of have a plan for these sea days? Did you go with the flow? Talk us through kind of your thought process as you kind of planned out those days.
My motto for this trip was I don't care, and not in a bad way. We travel a lot, and we bring our daughter with us everywhere, because we grew up traveling, so it's just part of it. So this was 4 nights, 5 days for us to get away and have zero responsibilities. So every time the couple that was with us asked about what the plan was for the day, my response was, I don't care. My only stipulation was, at dinner time we sat down for dinner, and other than that, whatever. I would always get up early. My wife likes to sleep a little bit later, and I like to get up early and enjoy the ship before it really wakes up. And one of my favorite spots to go to on any of the ships, I think this one is deck. I think this one's deck 7, 6, and 7. If you go all the way to the front, you can snake around through a couple of hallways, and you get out on this almost hidden balcony on the bow of the ship, and there's nobody out there. It's quiet, peaceful. You can see where you're headed. And the sea days would typically start like that. Also on this one, I would go to the very back of the ship, grab some breakfast, grab some coffee, and every morning the roof for the rear pool deck was closed. The Conquest and I think the Spirit class, they have retractable roofs on the rear pool deck, which makes for a really nice place in the morning, especially when you're sailing in the wintertime and you're looking for that place to sort of sit outside. But it's too cold, so they close the roof, turn the heaters on, and you have this nice little climate-controlled semi-outside area to sit. That was starting the sea days, and once everyone else woke up, we'd go have another breakfast, maybe even grab lunch on the Lido. We did do the sea day brunch both days, which was really, really nice. Get lunch, do a lot of the trivia, entertainment, all those things, just whatever we could find to fit the schedule. Sea days seemed to be whenever there was the most interesting action, and this may be the place to talk about this. Of all the cruises that we've been on, we've never seen the security team in action, except for on this cruise. We saw the security team 3 times.
Oh my gosh.
And it was never the kids. People, stress about kids being on cruises, and before we even set foot on this one, the announcer that was, getting us onto the ship, he said there was over 900 children registered for this cruise.
Wow.
Which didn't bother us. That's my job. I spend the day with kids, but it's never the kids that cause the problem. It's always the adults, and walking on the ship within the first hour, there were 2 ladies that got in a scuffle because one of them moved the other one's stuff off the pool deck chair or something. So we saw the security team then. The first sea day, there was a guy that by 9:30 a.m. Already had too much to drink and was breaking it down on top of one of the bars, so they had to excuse him.
Oh my goodness.
But the most eventful one, this was the second sea day. So we had left Cozumel, and this was the second sea day on the way home. We were out on the Lido deck, and I went back to the room to get my sunglasses. And as I mentioned, we stayed on the Lido deck. Well, the way this works is you walk in from the Lido deck, you walk past the elevators, and you take a right to go towards the front of the ship on our side. We were staying on the port side. Well, if you look back, there's a few rooms that butt right up next to the Lido deck. Well, I hear some guy wailing on the door and screaming at somebody. I'm thinking, what is going on? So I just go up to my room and I turn around to peek around the corner, and it's a gentleman with, well, I guess he wasn't gentle at that point, but he was there with some kids, and he was beating on this door, just screaming and hollering. And next thing I know, one of the senior officers comes out, his a white shirt with the black shoulder stripes, and he's on his little phone, and he says, "No, I need y'all here now." And it was like something from a James Bond movie. These little bitty doors in the hallway opened up, and like 10 security guards came out.
Oh my gosh.
I'm serious, yeah. And so they grabbed this guy, and he's like, "Oh no, I'll calm down. I'm sorry." And the officer said, "No, this is my ship, and you go by my rules." And we never saw that guy for the rest of the cruise.
Oh my gosh.
Jeez.
I've heard stuff like on TikTok or on social media about fights and things, and you see them on all the major cruise line like Norwegian and Carnival and Royal. You have that, but I think definitely, like you said, that crowd is more of a shorter cruise. The older ship, the cheaper cruises, you probably see more of it than like the Icons. But even Icon and some of these select, like you see some of that stuff. So it just depends on who gets on the ship and has a rough day or has the drink package working a little too much that day and
A little too early.
wants to start a fight. It just happens.
And like I said, this is, out of all the Carnival cruises that we've been on, this is the first time that we had seen the security team ever, and it was 3 of them on this one. So it was, but I mean, we kind of expected things like that going into it because we talk about that all the time. There's been times whenever we could have hopped on a cruise out of New Orleans for $500 for the both of us for
Wow.
5 or 6 days. And I was like, no, it's not. I'll pay the couple extra dollars to, have a little bit more peace and quiet.
How were the crowds? Speaking of peace and quiet, how were the crowds? Were they typically on the sea days, where you're able to get seats by the pool deck, no problem? Or did you feel like it was kind of like, how was the spacing? Like, was it a little too many guests per the space that was allocated for those spaces?
Yeah, we have found that the weather plays a big role in this. We had beautiful weather for the entire cruise, so the outside spaces were full, which meant that the inside spaces were not quite as crowded. Now, I mean, the Lido deck was always bustling. If you did want a chair, there was always room. It was crowded, but it wasn't anything terrible. And then when you went to go, get some, if you wanted to get in line for the deli or something, you might have had 10 or 15 people in line. It was never overcrowded. We never had problems finding a place to sit. But again, I think the weather had a lot to do with that because our cruise back in June, we only had one good weather day, and that was the one day when it didn't seem crowded. But again, this one had perfect weather, so people were really spending time in the outside spaces, which took a big load off of those foot traffic spaces that you go through on the inside.
Sweet. So let's take a little bit of a turn now and talk about food. So I know you mentioned on your sea day you did the sea day brunch both days and that you like to sit down for dinner. Where else did you find yourself eating around the ship, whether for breakfast or lunch? And what did you think of the quality of the food you had?
Yeah, so the answer to that question would be yes, and everywhere. That's one of the things that we travel for and go for is the food, because it's those, especially on a cruise. Because if you get something you don't like, send it back, try something else. It gives us that chance to kind of branch out on those things. We did do sea day brunch. We did not go into the dining room for the port day. We just wanted to get off the ship and explore. And explore the port some. And that's one thing for first time cruisers, if they're not familiar with, Carnival does the sea day brunch, but every port day they have a port day breakfast in the dining room, which is really neat if you ever get the chance to do that. We didn't eat a lot off of the buffet line. We would usually get a late lunch. We'd grab something from the deli, which if y'all have never eaten the Carnival deli, it's phenomenal. And I'm not ashamed to say that I did sit down and eat 2 Reuben sandwiches, back to back, because it was just that good. It was really, really good.
That's awesome.
I think my wife got something off their famous Mongolian wok, which it's always good too. Plenty of things to choose from. And on the Valor, it's almost a secret people don't know about. So the Lido deck is 9, but if you go to level 10 above where the restaurant is, there's a separate barbecue restaurant up there. It's not Guy's Barbecue. I think they just call this one Old Fashioned Barbecue.
Yeah.
But it was good. I mean, it wasn't the best, but it was good. And there's not a whole lot of people that go up there. So if you're looking for a quieter place to sit inside, that was a good spot to go. We enjoyed that. And of course, the main dining room at night was always kind of the highlight of the day. Our server, I'll give him a shout out, Novi. He was, out of all the cruises we've been on, he was probably the best main dining room server that we'd ever had.
Wow.
Very attentive. He would take care of things before we even had a question. The food was great. We had a couple things that weren't as good as what we had hoped. I remember the days of sailing on Carnival pre-COVID,
Yeah.
and you could get prime cut steaks in the dining room, no extra charge. And, not to say that what you get in there is bad now, because it's not, but it's definitely not the same quality that it used to be. But nevertheless, we still enjoyed it. We definitely did not starve on this one at all. And one particular dish that stuck out over all of them, besides the countless Reubens that I ate, uh, at the main dining room, I think it's on Elegant night. Well, every night on the menu they have some Emerald selects. Emerald's from down here, Louisiana, so he redid some of the menu on the Carnival ships, and they have a little section every night dedicated to some of his menu items. But I think it's on the formal night they have this crawfish strudel bread thing, and it was ridiculous. It was like crack. It was wonderful. But again, the food was great. We couldn't complain at all, and we wonder, because we're in a lot of Facebook groups and do a lot of social media with the cruises, and people get off of this particular boat and complain about the food, and we couldn't really find any room to complain about it. It was really, really good.
Food is it's a hard thing, right? Because everyone's got their own experiences with food. We've talked about this before on the podcast, but like depending on where you're from and, your background and the types of food that you like to eat, it's hard to have an apples to apples comparison. Also, someone that went on the Valor a month ago versus, when you went on the cruise, it could be different chefs, it could be different servers. So it's like hard to really say just because someone had a bad experience like a few weeks ago that means you're going to have a bad experience. I really
Right.
can't even, it's hard to really say. But I will agree with the fact that I think after COVID, with all the debt that the cruise lines took on overall, I think that they did cut back on the food, on portions. Now it's like I do order 2 to 3 entrees and try different things because just getting one entree, sometimes now it's too small. So I would agree with the sentiment that it's not what it used to be, but you can still typically find things that are good, really good. Then you'll also find things you're like, I won't get that again,
Yeah. And one thing that Carnival, and I'm not sure when exactly they did start doing it, but when you order of course, it sounds ridiculous even saying it. When you order your third entree, I think it's $5 after that or something like that. But I mean, realistically, we never got to the point to where we were wanting a third entree because we would always order a couple of appetizers and then at least one main dish. But yeah, the portions have gotten different because I remember when my wife and I first started cruising, one thing that Carnival is famous for at dinner time is their cold shrimp cocktail. And used to they'd give you 6, 8, sometimes 10 shrimp. Well, now it's 2.
They
But
ordered like
in
3
their
of them.
defense, it could be to cut back on some waste because I'm sure that some of us Louisiana folks were getting shrimp hoping that it'd be boiled nice and spicy the way that we like to eat it. But so the fix for that is just order 3 or 4 shrimp cocktails, no problem.
One last thing, speaking of food, the late night dining options on the ship. I know Carnival recently had kind of switched how they're doing their late night pizza, and they brought back the midnight buffet, and they're doing like the midnight snacks, but they're closing the pizza early. What did this look like on your cruise? I'm not too sure exactly when you sailed again, but had this change been in effect yet?
Yeah, so we sailed at the end of November, and November 1st was whenever they enacted the new structure for the late night dining, the late night buffet. We passed by at one time. We don't ever eat that late at night.
Okay.
But we just wanted to go see what it was about. I think it's probably going to have its ups and downs. I guess I understand why people were a little upset about the pizza getting cut. But I thought that maybe it'd be a good thing because no matter what time we passed by the pizza parlor, it was always a line. Even if it was 1 o'clock in the morning, it was always a line. And I guess maybe what Carnival was thinking is that if they could push those pizzas out of their regular kitchen, then people wouldn't be waiting. And then it gives them that other option. There was plenty of stuff. There's the standard menu that they have, but then a lot of the things that they were going to put out on the buffet earlier that day, or even some of the leftover items from the main dining room menu were on the late night buffet.
Okay.
So it was a pretty impressive spread. I'm not sure if that's standard across all the ships or if that's just how they were doing it on this one for that particular time. But it was definitely, it'd be hard for someone to go hungry. I think with the late night dining now, I think you only have about a 4-hour window on the ship when nobody's serving food. So, I think it's a good option for people that are looking for something like that.
So now let's talk about additional add-ons, right? A lot of the cruise fare, covers your basic food like you mentioned, and that's all great. But then you got your normal add-ons, right? Your drink package, your Wi-Fi, you've got spa treatments. Did you guys end up doing any of these add-ons on your cruise? And if you did, what did you think about your experience with those on the Carnival Valor?
Yeah, so we kept a budget in mind on this cruise. We didn't have the Carnival Wi-Fi. I did something a little different for phone service this time, since our little one was going to be at home with my parents and her parents. We did want to keep in touch. Our mobile provider has a package where you can just pay a one-time fee, and then you have X number of minutes to talk and X number of data. And we legitimately just wanted to be able to call home once a day, and ended up working out really well. I think it does work off of Carnival's Wi-Fi. It's something that the mobile company has set up in agreement with Carnival because there's only certain ships. But we would be sitting in the lobby. I'd take my phone off airplane mode, dial up one of our parents' numbers, call, and it was just like talking on land. And then as soon as we got off, I would put it back on airplane mode so that we wouldn't eat up any data or anything. As far as the spa goes, I did splurge and go get a beard trim and face shave, which was a first for me, and that was $25 well spent. I couldn't believe it was that cheap because they gave me a good treatment. It was about an hour and a half I was in there.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed. I mean, it was the whole, wrap the towel around my face, just the nose sticking out. I mean, it was neat. I was surprised at how busy the spa and salon were up there. I mean, it was standing room only when I got up there. Of course, it was a sea day, which I'm sure that has a lot to do with it, because I think on port days they'll do like some discounts and then schedule or whatever. But I was impressed, and it was an experience. It was really neat.
Did you guys end up doing any drink package on this cruise, Eric?
No, we stuck to pretty much all the complimentary stuff. I think, my wife might have got a couple of blended things every now and then, but we have Carnival stock, so we get X amount of onboard credit based on the number of days that we sail. So that plus onboard credit from whatever booking we do, we usually have enough to where we can just use that for any specialty things that we want.
All right, so let's move on to the entertainment options you had on Carnival. I know between like the playlist productions and comedy on the ship in the evening, I personally feel like there's a good amount of options you have after dinner in the evenings. What type of shows did you catch on the ship?
We were somehow able to, I think, hit every bit of entertainment on this ship, and it was a good variety that I think would please anybody's musical or entertainment palette. We were able to see all of the productions in the main theater. Typical standard Carnival music. I think one of the shows we'd actually seen a couple times before. I'm not sure what Carnival's rotation schedule is for the playlist productions, but if you go often enough, you'll probably see some repeats. And then, of course, I think it's the last night they do the I forget the name of it, People of the World or something like that. Anyway, it just showcases all of the folks that are working on board and the different nationalities and countries that they're from. And we were really touched by that. That was a really neat show because somebody from each country comes up, holds the flag. And I think on that particular sailing, there were people from 42 different countries working on that one boat, which was really, really cool. The Love and Marriage show was probably the highlight of the entertainment. The director, Lizzie, did a great job with that. If you're not familiar with that, they picked three couples, a very newlywed couple, like that just got married a few hours ago, a couple that's been married for 5 or 10 years, and then the longest married couple they can find. And I think they were married for 61 years or something like that. And so at the end of the show, the cruise director, she asked the husband, she said, "Sir, can you tell me what your secret is for 61 years of happy marriage?" And without skipping a beat, he said, "I don't know, ask my wife." So that was good. And then we got to go to all the comedy. The rated R comedy might have been a little too much for our taste. I mean, it was funny, but it was a little much for us. So we decided to give the guy, I forget his name. I meant to write his name down before this. But we decided to give him a shot at the PG show because he was doing rated R and PG. Well, the PG one actually happened to be in the main theater, which was a whole different dynamic. But he was so incredible. Like, we were busting a gut in there. He was so funny. And so that's pretty talented if you can, really work the room with both types of crowds. And live music was sprinkled all over the ship. Of course, the string trio was wonderful. They had a 90s country group singing, and then a guy doing guitar solos. And there's a bunch of venues on that ship. There's the main atrium stage. There's actually a stage on the side of the casino, and then there's also a little stage corner in the, I think it's the Red Frog rum bar that they've got set up there. So plenty of entertainment. It was all great. And the entertainment director, Trevor is his name. I got to give him a shout out because he's from up the road in Lafayette, Louisiana. But it was great. Entertainment all over the place, all the time. Trivia was great too. We really, really enjoyed all of those things.
So now let's talk a little bit about the ship layout, right? You've been on Carnival's Dream Class. What did you think about the ship and how it felt on board, and how easy was it to navigate and find venues and, navigate the elevator system, since you were up at the top deck getting down to, like you said, the the dining rooms? Did it feel like the ship had a good flow to it, or did it sometimes feel like at night it could get a little congested?
Yeah, we were pretty comfortable with this layout. It was very, very similar to a dream class. There were a couple things that were adjusted, maybe one deck higher or one deck lower. The couple that we were with, they weren't quite as comfortable with it, so navigating them around was a little tricky sometimes. If you go to deck 3 or 4, you can't walk all the way through because that's usually where the kitchen or some kind of workroom is. So, like if we were meeting at the dining room, the couple that we were with were in the main lobby, they would have to go up, navigate back, and then come back down. They got the hang of it. But we were super comfortable with it. It's a layout that makes sense for us. I guess because we had spent so much time on the Dream class, it's kind of all the same layout. Typical theater front, lobby in the middle, shops in the middle, and then your Lido and the restaurants and things in the back. The crowds got, depending on what time you were trying to get around, if it was close to dinner time, the crowds got a little crazy. Um, the first night we were trying to get into the comedy lounge, I think it's called the Eagles Lounge. It's on the back of the ship, deck 5. Yeah, I think it's deck 5. The line to get into the first comedy show was literally stretching from the comedy club all the way back to the main lobby. So almost the entire length of the ship. And we thought for sure there's no way we're getting in there. Well, it's a huge lounge. And matter of fact, we were able to get in there and there were still seats open. But crowds weren't terrible. I mean, it was typical. It wasn't anything outside of what we expected. And we were super comfortable with the layout of the ship. And thinking about layout, it's interesting because even though it's a smaller ship than the Dream class, the way that the atrium lobby is laid out, that space felt much, much larger. Don't really know why, but it was a really nice layout. We enjoyed it.
Speaking of the Dream class, did this ship have like an ocean plaza area, like the Magic and Breeze and all that?
No, it does not, and that is one thing that we kind of missed on this particular ship, because on the Dream class they have that. It's deck 5 center, and that's where you would have the coffee shop, guys barbecue. There would be a stage for performing. I think the alchemy is right there too, and it wraps around to the Red Frog, and you can kind of pass through from one side of the ship to the other. This did not have that, so we did find ourselves missing that every now and then. But again, there was space in the lobby to do sort of the same thing. Because matter of fact, anytime we would board a Dream class ship, everyone else would head to the Lido deck. Well, we would head to Ocean Plaza because
Okay.
on port days, guys barbecue is open, so we
Yep.
grab a plate and there would always be room to sit there. So yeah, we did find ourselves missing that on this ship.
Now let's talk about the service you had on the ship and the crew. Like you said in the nationality show, I think you said there was 42 different countries on the ship, which is crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
we always talk about how much we love the workers on the ship. How was your service and just the workers you interacted with on the ship?
Yeah, we've had many conversations about this since we got home from this cruise, that the service on this one was second to none. I mean, it's almost hard to compare because we've not experienced bad service on Carnival ever, but this was even better. Our stateroom attendant was so attentive to everything, very very talkative, which as y'all can probably guess, I don't mind that at all. But real genuine is the word I'm looking for. Real sincere. And same thing with our dining room wait staff was absolutely wonderful. Anybody that we came in contact with on the ship, it was great. And I think that I know I really can't speak for everybody, but I find that those that complain about the service are the same people that don't reciprocate that type of hospitality. Because I mean, if you're rude to your stateroom attendant, then what reason do they have to
Right.
be polite back to you? But we had nothing but good things to say, and we made sure to fill out that survey. And I'm always buzzing John Heald on Facebook with stuff and making sure that these people get their proper shout outs, because they were we really had the golden team this time, even with the cruise director Lizzie and entertainment director Trevor, and it was just really good. It's going to be hard to top that on our next one, so we've got some pretty high expectations set.
Well, you said that you had a couple things to talk about with the disembarkation process and your parking situation. But yeah, how did your cruise had to come to an end at some point after 4 nights? It's sad to wrap up any cruise, and sounds like you had a great time. How was the process of getting off in New Orleans, and how was that situation that when you tipped the porter? How did that end up panning out for you at the end?
Even just talking about debarkation gives me a little bit of sadness because you're right. It has to come to an end at some point. And that last night of walking back to the room where people put their luggage outside to have Carnival check it. It's almost like you're walking that Tom Hanks movie, The Green Mile. You're walking the mile. Disembarkation was a little different for us this time. Without our toddler with us, we were able to stretch it out as far as we could. So we chose the latest disembarkation time, and we did self-assist luggage. So we just rolled it with us. We ended up going to the Lido and enjoying kind of a late breakfast, early lunch until the very end. I think we didn't get off the ship until, oh goodness, I think it was after 9 o'clock. Like it was the last possible moment to get off, which I think from now on, that might be what we do because it seemed like the checkout process was a lot quicker and easier. We were kind of at the end of the line. We went down to the lobby, snaked on through. They scanned us, checked us out. It's fine. And so we're walking off the ship, and we go through customs and everything. This was my only nick that with New Orleans. There's lots of places that you're walking through where people stop and they don't need to. And it really causes some traffic. Well, that's the difference with if you ever cruise out of Galveston. In Galveston, they don't let you stop at all. Like
Yeah.
you have to stop at the next waiting area, which helps because you move nonstop. Well, all that being said, when we're leaving New Orleans, we get to an escalator and we're coming down, and I see all these people are stopped at the bottom of the escalator. And in about 10 seconds, it's about to get really hairy because we've got nowhere to go. So I had to use my teacher voice and basically tell these grown people to move out of the way because it was about to get serious. But going back to the porter, at first, the whole few days I've been thinking, oh, it's going to be a mess getting out of the garage because it's crowded. We're at the last. And it's a madhouse out there. There's not enough room at the New Orleans port for people that want to do the drop off and pick up. It's just not enough room. And so we get to the car and I put the luggage in, and I realize at that point where he had parked us. So there was our car, two others, and then there was the gate to leave. So we were literally parked right by the exit of the garage.
Oh, wow.
Which, I mean, it really came in handy because we got in the car, pulled up to the gate, and they've got people out there directing traffic. And within 2 minutes of sitting in the car, we were on I-10 headed back home.
That is insane. Going back real quick to the to walking off the ship, does New Orleans have the facial recognition? I know you mentioned customs. Do they do the passport where you just walk through if you have a passport and it's all facial recognition, or do you actually have to talk to a customs agent in New Orleans?
No, they utilize the facial recognition, which I'm so glad that they do because it makes things so much easier.
Okay, awesome. No, that's great that you were able to get out of the port really quick. I feel like that process sometimes can just be, just so fun getting out of a parking deck after a cruise.
All right, so to wrap up here now, Erik, kind of just some last thoughts. Like you said, the service you had you felt was top notch. How would you compare this cruise against some of the past cruises you've done?
Dollar for dollar, we definitely got our value out of this one. It is almost hard to compare ship to ship because you do get a different experience on each. But this one was great. It was relaxing. I'm sure we gained a few pounds, but it was really neat. We were impressed at the overall condition of the ship, considering I think the first sail of this one was 2002. So you're looking at 23 years old now. But we were super impressed with how well kept it was. And I think I mentioned pre-interview that it's going in for dry dock in April. So we're excited to see what it looks like when it comes out, and hopefully can jump on it then.
Is there anything that you feel like you would have done differently on this cruise, knowing what you know now and the experience that you had? Would you do it any differently, or you feel like you maximized and did everything right given your previous experiences on Carnival?
Yeah, I feel like we really squeezed every dollar we could out of this one. It was, really, it was wonderful. From where, the location of where we stayed, the wait staff that we had, the options that we did for the port day and things we did on the sea days, it was really great. It really was.
Now, you mentioned before we started recording, you do have some other cruises coming up booked. What are you sailing coming up here in the future?
So far for this year, it's coming up pretty quick. The very beginning of March, we'll be taking a 6-nighter out of Galveston on the Dream. We're super excited about that. We haven't been on the Dream since 2019, but we're taking a sort of a small family group. Our daughter's coming with us again, and in-laws are coming, and some other friends and cousins. So we'll have a nice little group, and I think that one's going to have three ports of call, but that'll be for our Mardi Gras break. That's actually a holiday here in Louisiana, so we get time off work for it.
That's awesome. Well, Erik, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on and talking about your time on the Carnival Valor. And hopefully we get to have you on maybe after your upcoming trip on the Dream in a couple of weeks. So that's awesome.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we just want to thank Erik again for his time on the podcast. It was really great just to hear about an older Carnival ship and just his thoughts and opinions and based on his experience recently. So thank you again, Erik, for coming on, and we look forward to having you back on the podcast. If you're interested in booking a cruise with us, we'd love to help you book a cruise. You can reach out to us on Facebook, Instagram. You can send us an email at cruiseconversations@gmail.com. We have a jot form in the description of this episode, or you can shoot us a text at 704-313-8556, and we'd love to help you price it out, get the best price, but also make sure that we can add some onboard credit for you just to say thanks for booking with us. So with that, thank you so much. Make sure you check out YouTube as well. We've got our vlog uploaded on there. We've got a lot of content coming from our recent cruise on Allure of the Seas. With that, thank you so much, and we'll see you back here next Wednesday.